Welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and some waves in their industries. Today, we're thrilled to have a special guest who's been navigating the intersection of family law, men's rights advocacy, and legal education. Join us as we sit down with Larry DiMarco, Executive Manager for the International Council for Men and Boys. Plus, he's a partner at DiMarco and DiMarco PC and the founder of the Law Center. Larry DiMarco, welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. I feel the same way. It's great to have you on, and we can chat about maybe a headline that's like constantly buried, is that advocating for the legal rights of men and boys. How did you get into that?
I am in Pennsylvania, part of a movement called the Pennsylvania Campaign for Greater Father-Family Involvement. My boss with the International Council, the president, Ed Bartlett, and I connected because of his advocacy with the International Council. One of our most important issues are father absence with the council. So what I was doing in Pennsylvania and what he's doing globally, internationally, they're really all near identical. So it was a natural fit for us to work together.
Is it just family law? Have there been some notable cases that you've been able to advocate for legal equity?
Yes. I ran for judge back in 2018. Not officially ran, but I sought my local party's endorsement, and I published a campaign video advocating for court reform generally and family law advocates, not in my neighborhood, not in my jurisdiction, but across the country and on a larger part, really the world, watched the video, and I didn't even put any keywords in it. I just mailed it to my committee members or to my chair. And so really it took off from there because I had no idea what the need was there, not just locally, but internationally. Right. So I have been advocating for court reform that really affects family law litigants the most.
Wow. So, Larry, is it possible to give us the top three maybe injustices that men and boys encounter specifically in the United States?
Let me mention to you that there's 12 areas of male disadvantage. Okay. And that's statistically based. We can, they're really in no particular order. Gotcha. And it's funny that I did think that you were going to ask. So I have this readily available. Forgive me for looking down.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I'm going to just list them real quick, okay? Real quickly.
Go for it.
Education, health, the boy crisis, which is father absence, false allegations, victim of violence, parenting, criminal systems or criminal injustices, partner abuse, homelessness, workplace injury or death, reproductive rights, and media bias.
Wow.
Those are the 12, and I defer to you to what you want to discuss when we, go on from there. And those issues do affect women as well. My passion is for court reform, but a lot of them really disproportionately affect men, which is why the council is trying to help those areas of male disadvantage and raise awareness to bring about change.
That's right. And once people have the awareness and they realize that something's going on, then they can actually help advocate as well for the men they know. Out of those 12, I think one of the big ones that sticks out to me, and I don't know if you had anything to do with this, but the Duke sports team. Sorry, the type of sport they were in escapes me, but
lacrosse.
Yeah, lacrosse. That's right. So did you have anything to do with that, or is that kind of a touch point in the 12?
Well, we certainly followed it. And yes, we did a press release on it, specifically 20 years later when the accuser admitted that she lied after being in prison for something unrelated.
Yeah.
But false
Wow.
allegations, of course, as you mentioned, is one of the top items of awareness or male disadvantage that we're raising.
Mhm.
And of course, women will also know about that if they've been in a high conflict custody battle. So yes, we publicize that, and we gather things like statistics. Of those 12 items, not just false allegations, but all 12 are statistically and scientifically backed by research, by high respected quality research. So these are just not anecdotes or
Right.
opinion. It's scientifically based.
So, even with all that evidence, why do you think that these 12 are overlooked? Is it intentional, or what do you think's behind that?
An overcorrection.
Hmm.
As you may, we're believe in really being a movement for the all of greater societal good. And we recognize that historically, women have faced brutal hardships as well. And going back even more severe, arguably, really, life is tough on both sexes, not
Yeah.
just men.
Yeah.
But we recognize what women have been through. For instance, genital mutilation, mandatory hijabs, and the penalty of death if you don't follow it, not being able to forced marriages, not being able to be educated. So women had it rough too. But really, lately, billions of dollars in funds have been set up to correct the injustice against women, to the point where in the past 30 years in the United States, Canada, and really 100 countries out of, you know, or the majority
Yes.
of the population and countries are faced now. Women have passed men.
Wow.
They've gone beyond correction because a lot of the issues of these 12, both genders face, but we've thrown money at the problem for women and we're leaving our boys behind and men. We're
Yeah.
neglecting those issues as it relates to men. And we just want to create a new narrative of when you think of gender equality, you got to think of the weak in both and raise both genders with
Right.
whatever correction you have.
Yeah, though there's disadvantage on both sides. Now, just looking over some other information, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the International Council of Men and Boys had launched an effort to gather and analyze data on the disparity affecting men and boys worldwide. So, can you tell us what some of those parameters and issues were that were looked into?
Sure. Thank you for drawing attention to our website. At the bottom, we have a link called Country Specific Research, where
Wow.
we have reached out. Our partner organization, Domestic Abuse and Violence International Alliance, has over 176 members. We're really growing every week or almost every day.
Wow.
So, with 38 countries, we are asking all our partner organizations to share with us their own reports, stories, research about what specifically is happening in their country in terms of male inequality, because we have research from the World Bank and many of the United Nations, their own studies and whatnot. But we want to also reach out to individual countries and hear what their own stories are. And we're starting in Latin America. So that has and we have links on our page at the bottom of the foot of our website. And that's the more recent project we've undertaken. Thank you for
Wow.
asking.
Oh, that's great. And now you've got something upcoming in March, which is just less than 8 weeks away. And so you had mentioned other countries, and I know looking over information in preparation for this, I had seen something called the Beijing Declaration. Did you want to get into that and then the event that's coming up on March 12th?
Certainly. It's a great question. And I thank you for asking about that. This is the anniversary of the Beijing Action Declaration, which is really a declaration for women and girls to raise awareness of inequality and the advances that women have made and still need to make. In New York, there is a commission for women. I think it's the 69th annual that happens in March, which corresponds to March, which is Women's History Month. So in Beijing, 30 years ago, they made that historic declaration. And as I mentioned to you, there's been somewhat of an overcorrection to where we're leaving men and boys behind because of neglect. So we are in New York on that 30th anniversary, also going to make a declaration, a New York declaration for men and boys, raising awareness of these 12 items of male disadvantage and the solutions that we want to see. And it's kind of parallel to that 30-year-old Beijing Declaration for Women.
Wow. So if the women get a month of March, is there one for the men?
Yes, thank you for asking again. And this is also a landing spot on our website, menandboys.net. November is Men's Equality Month. And we chose November to coincide with November 19th, which is International Men's Day, where we recognize men who are positive role models. We celebrate the accomplishments of men, of fathers. We emphasize the importance of harmony between men and women, husband and wife, and the family. So just like you mentioned, March is just like we have a Mother's Day and we have March for women, we have Father's Day and November for Men's Equality Month.
That's great. So has your experience in family law influenced your advocacy work for men's rights?
Yes. Family law is an extremely dangerous place. And I have to emphasize for your female listeners, it is certainly dangerous for women as well, for a multitude of reasons. You asked about my personal experience, so I'll share with you how hard I had to fight for equal shared parenting, how high conflict situations are, that the fire is actually fueled by the court system because of incentives, incentives that are inherent in the legal system, financial incentives, both for Title 4D, child support reimbursements under the Social Security Act, and how legal fees are set up that the more people fight and bicker, the more money they're going to make. Judges who don't want to make this would rather not make hard decisions and just wait until the parties work it out. So yes, there's ways that the system can be changed to make it safer for litigants, which is what I promote and I'm fighting in my career to help.
Now, one of the other things that I know you've done is you've created resources for self-represented litigants in family court. What inspired that initiative, and what challenges do these individuals typically face?
Going on my personal experience, Michael, I would have been broken and bankrupt with all my savings and all my, I was lucky. I have a law degree. The course, my profession was good to me, so I had resources, but I saw how things were going with my ex, on how she wouldn't agree what day of the week it was when we're trying to work things out. So my legal bills were adding up when there was no real dispute between us. It was all being created and lawyers were helping. I knew that I had to handle things myself, but I had a law degree. I'm a professional in law, not family law. I had to learn that from scratch. Wow. And I had some lawyer colleagues recommend people to help me who saw me as an individual to pay that could afford to pay a bill, not someone that they owed any other type of courtesy. So I knew I would be bankrupt if I just let things play out the way the lawyers and the judge wanted it to play out. So I represented myself and I survived. And I saved some of my son's tuition money and I saved my house. But it would not have, other people are not as lucky. I was lucky because of my education. So I created a program, an online program that could teach people going through what I went through, how to help themselves and reduce their expenses. And that's been a kind of a life mission.
Right. Now, circling back to your organization, because this is a bit of bridge building. This isn't like, one side versus the other. This is actually people coming together for mutual benefit, I would say. But your organization has praised efforts by women-led groups to support men and boys. Can you share some examples of this collaboration?
Sure. And I think the most important thing is a recognition
Hmm.
by men and men who help women and women who help men. This
Yeah.
is not a zero-sum game. As the International Council for Men and Boys, we are not trying to take money away from women. We are
Hmm.
trying to change a narrative that women don't want men falling behind in education or work, because then they're not going to have a partner who is able to support their family or a spouse that they want to marry. They're not
Yeah.
going to have they're not going to have partners in life. So we have another on our menandboys.com website, we have a resource called She for He,
Hmm.
which of course you might recognize as a
Yeah.
parallel for the movement He for She.
Yeah.
So it's so important for men and women to support each other. And we do have lists of various organizations. For instance, Melinda Gates gave $40 million to male organizations, to organization. In all her billions that she's giving to women, she still thought, you know what? We have to support men and boys for the same things that we're supporting women for, or men will get left behind. That's the general concept. There's an example for you. And I can't
Hmm.
emphasize enough, this is about both sexes
Yeah.
thriving together.
Yeah. And people realizing that we need that rising tide to lift all boats up. Now, your organization advocates for change in how domestic violence is defined and prosecuted. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Statistics show that men are almost equal for all practical intents and purposes. The statistics are really, really close in terms of who suffers from intimate partner violence. So if there was some resources for men, this would be a much greater problem. But there are no more than one or two domestic violence shelters across the country for men, but there are thousands for women.
Mm-hmm.
So you have what could be a very, a workable issue. You have, but you have that type of problem becoming the leading cause of homelessness for men. Men are 76% homeless, but most of the shelters in this country are for women. And that's a problem. Um, and part of the problem is we recognize violence against women, that we know it happens. So that if the police come to a house and a woman has red around their wrists because a man was trying to protect himself
Mm-hmm.
from the black eye that he received, if a cop sees a man with a black eye and a woman with bruises around her wrist, he's going to arrest the man. He or she, the cop,
Right.
is going to end up arresting the man. So men may be physically stronger. Women have the power of the law
Uh-huh.
and a bias that equals that playing field and causes both sides to be equal victims of domestic violence.
Right. Well, it's good to shed the light into those dark places and just to raise awareness, and then we can ask questions. And it has been said the best answers are given with the maximum amount of information. So, looking ahead, do you see what do you see as the most pressing issues facing men and boys, and how does your organization plan to address them in the future?
So it's so hard to pick one, and
Okay.
we deliberately don't rate. No, but I have an answer for you, and it's a
Okay.
good
Good.
question.
Good.
So I think awareness and media bias and implicit bias are a huge problem. And it's implicit bias is actually greater against men than it
Hmm.
is against some other protected groups, because people aren't aware of it. You have all these hate laws against misogyny, against women, but yet people think it's funny on TV for a
Yes.
man's genitals for a man to double over in extreme pain. We value women more in society, and there's something like 69 or 70% there's been a study of this in Australia, of media depictions of men are negative. Our sitcoms, our famous sitcoms, Al Bundy, Everybody Loves Raymond, the man, and more, The Simpsons. The man is a doofus in the major sitcoms of our society, whereas the women is often the heroic character. So these biases against men, the word toxic masculinity, this paints all the things we're discussing, from men not being good fathers or parents, from false allegations, men are considered abusers, from throwing the book at a man for the same crime that a woman gets a slap on the wrist. So to me, it all starts with this bias, this phrase, this awful phrase, toxic masculinity, to suggest that there's a redundant term, that being man is less of a person than a woman. So I start there. As the biggest issue facing the International Council and men and boys.
Right. And this almost actually seems like that image of the snake eating its tail, where you have this bias against males and husbands, fathers in the home, that separation. Could you speak a little bit to the unintended consequences of family life and community with this bias in place?
Sure. Part of the women's movement, the feminist movement in the 60s and 70s, that women wanted to be empowered, not to be dependent upon a man. So you had a well-intended, a well-meaning approach to empower women, but the negative part of a relatively more positive movement, but that negative part of that feminist movement to empower women was to encourage women to go it alone. Because then you started to set social policy that a woman is going to be better off without a man, because if she's just under that welfare line, she gets all this extra government funding, whereas if she marries a man making the same amount, they both struggle. So society taught men and women to go separately, live separately, don't go under the same roof, don't get married in whatever church or religious organization that you're a part of, or don't make it official, because the government's going to give you a penalty. They're going to take away your benefits, and they're going to make women more able to go it alone, which destroys, it's putting a system in place that's against the family. So that's what we saw in the past 60 years.
That's right. More. Yeah, replacing the man of the house with the government of the house, and all the shackles that actually come with that. Now, you had mentioned the concept of gender equality for men. Can you explain the meaning behind this and how it relates to this broader discussion that we've been talking about?
Sure. Gender equality for men is a term to change the narrative, because really we've only heard for the past ever so long, you can put it happened last century, but you only heard gender equality for women. And that's the narrative. What we at the International Council, we want to raise all boats, and we don't want to take away from women, but we want people to hear both. We want them to understand that there is something called gender equality for men, that men need to fight for. The right to father. Men have to fight for the right to be a parent for their child. And you have, majority female or single women raising their child, not because men want it that way. It might be because they can't afford to do it. And you have men called deadbeat dads because of burdensome child support laws that undue burden because of a financial system for the government, because states have an incentive to collect unpaid child support laws, and then they get more government funding for welfare.
Wow.
So there's just some, but it's really, when you hear gender equality for men, I really hear gender equality for all. But that hashtag is necessary to change the narrative. It's a cry for help for a system that ignores men and disadvantages them to a degree. So it's for equality. The real fight is for equality because this is a fixable issue. It's
Right.
a fixable problem.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap things up, for those interested in supporting your cause or learning more, what resources or actions would you recommend?
So actions, we'll start there,
Yeah.
is celebrate International Men's Day on November 19th and Men's Equality Month in November. Acknowledge Father's Day like you acknowledge Mother's Day. We have resources on our website called, or the website of the council, which is menandboys.net. On the home page, if you scroll down, you will see all 12 items of male inequality, and a pop-up comes where you can get our press releases that you're familiar with, and I thank you for doing that and following us. But other people can join the wave and get our weekly newsletters about solutions for our 12, for newsletters and releases, but we are constantly looking for solutions and ways to fight these 12 areas of male disadvantage, which of course are really issues that really do affect men and women.
Right. Larry, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today. Thank you for joining me on the 5am podcast.
Mike, thank you again for having me as a guest. I appreciated this opportunity.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And thank you at home for listening or in your vehicle, listening to 5am podcast. We are glad you joined us and we appreciate it if you'd be so kind as to share this important conversation with the men in your life. Thanks again for watching and listening. I'm Michael Klassen.